Good evening friends, you are most welcome to Civil Affairs channel. Today we are going to discuss social anthropology by MAAN IGNOU and our topic is Comparative Ethnography MANE003 Development and Change. In Unit 1 we will discuss revisiting a field area, Ethnography 1, the Rajgons of Adilabad, a peasant culture of the Deccan, myth and ritual by Fourier Hammendorf. Ethnography 2, the Gonds of Andhra Pradesh, tradition and change in an Indian tribe by Fourier Hammendorf. Unit 2, developmental anthropology, ethnography 1, India's changing village, human factors in community development by S.C. Dubey. Ethnography 2, capitalism, primitive and modern, some aspects of Tolai economic growth by T. Scarlett Epstein. In Unit 3, we will discuss indigenous knowledge, ethnography 1, sacred ecology, traditional ecological knowledge, and resource management by Fikret Burks. Ethnography 2, Setho, African thought and belief system by Fezekail Futwa. Introduction part. An important aspect in anthropological research is the restudy of the same area which was earlier studied. This is done in order to gauge the changes that have occurred in the society under study along with the community maintained from the past. Raymond Fitts' study of the Tikopians is a well known example of restudy. It is also possible that one may carry out two synchronic studies of the same society at different points of time and then compare these to find out the degree of change. However, such a study will not be able to throw light on the process of change. Many scholars have been concerned with the issues of incorporating changes in a functional study. The first unit that you will read is concerned with the revisit of a field area. The books discussed here are those that Christoph von Christoph von Fourier-Hammendorf wrote on the Gonds and largest tribe of the central India. Fourier-Hammendorf was an Austrian anthropologist who has the distinction of carrying out 80 months field work spread between three entirely different cultural areas, Assam, Hyderabad, and upland Nepal. The second unit comprises the section on development anthropology. The first work is by T. Scarlett Epstein and the second by S.C. Dubey, whilst Dubey is concerned with the changes occurring in Indian villages. Epstein contributes to the study of the relationship between economic development and social change in the field work, including here. You will read about her study of the Tolai, a Melanesian tribe of the Gazelle Peninsula. Here she highlights the presence of certain capitalist features among the Tolai of the pre-contact period which led her to use the term primitive capitalism for them. She also discussed the process of evolution of the primitive capitalist economy of the Tolai into the Western capitalist system. In his work, Dubey offers a comprehensive theoretical framework for the study of change in village area. His book examines some important human factors in economic development and culture change. The last unit deals with the indigenous knowledge. Firket Burke's volume is a contribution to what has come to be known as the traditional ecological knowledge tech, taking examples from his fieldwork among the Cree of the Canadian subarctic. He has reservations about the use of the word traditional because tradition is static, whereas the term like local and indigenous are adapted to contemporary needs. Tech, that is, traditional ecological knowledge, is culturally transmitted. The knowledge, practice, belief complex is primarily concerned with the relations between living beings and including human. The book furthers the non dualistic view of nature and culture. The idea that runs through the entire work is that if nature is permeated with sacredness and if human existence is an inalienable part of nature, it is impossible to separate religious ethic from ecology. The final text here is Fezekail Futuwa's study of Africa. The author refers African thoughts and beliefs. Born in South Africa, the author says that the word God exists in all African languages. The indigenous belief of the African is centered on the concept of Sitho, meaning supernatural. The individual who practices Sitho is called Motho. The author argues that the concept of religion cannot be separated from the culture and heritage of a society, and therefore religion should be discussed in its language, otherwise, the meaning would be lost forever. Unit 1, Revisiting a Field Area. Let us begin the topic. Contents are introduction part. Then we will discuss theoretical part, of which the ethnography, the Rajgons of Adilabad or Adilabad, a peasant culture of the Deccan, myth and ritual is an example. Description of the ethnography, intellectual context, fieldwork, analysis of data and conclusion. How does the ethnography advance our understanding? Theoretical part of the ethnography, the Gonds of Andhra Pradesh, tradition and change in an Indian tribe is an example. Description of the ethnography, intellectual context, fieldwork, analysis of data, conclusion. How does the ethnography advance our understanding? At the last, we will discuss the summary. Learning objectives are, after reading this unit, you will be able to understand the concept of tribe, organization of tribal society, idea of re-study, and changes that come in a society over time. Introduction part, the extensive study carried out among the Gondi speaking tribe by Fourier Hammendorf has come forth with several voluminous works describing in detail the ethnographic account of that tribe. Although Greason's and Alvin's monograph dealt with Gonds of Bastar, no comparable accounts existed on the Rajgons, and this led to the widespread work on the latter inhabiting the region between the Godavari and Penganga by Fourier Hammendorf. In the Rajgons of Adilabad, peasant culture of the Deccan, in an in-depth study is carried on from the perspective of the Gond material culture, which includes their immediate environment, the population pattern, and the village setup, the mythological foundation of their social order comprising the mythical origin of the Gonds, the mythical origin of their clan deities, and the cult of the clan deities. The interrelationship existing between the Gonds and other tribal and non-tribal populations, with an emphasis given to the study on an annual cycle, with the hot season, the rains, the cold seasons, and their association with the Gonds' economic activities and ceremonial rites related to agriculture, the basis of Gonds' economy. The Gonds live so close to earth that their thoughts and daily life are very much ruled by their manifold works in their field, forest, and the changing seasons. The whole structure of Gond culture, as of any peasant culture, rests ultimately on the successful raising of the crops. The settlement patterns of the Gond village is not determined by the isolation of individual clans, but it is rather near blood relations and family linked by ties of marriage that like to build their houses in close proximity. The social norms regulating the tribe life of the Gonds are firmly rooted in mythology. They derive their validity from the ruling of culture heroes and from the actions of deified ancestors recount in epics and songs. The Rajgons are far more. The Rajgons are far from aspiring to inclusion in the Hindu fold, considering themselves the true exponents of Gond culture, Gond dialect, and above all, Gond religion. The basis of the social structure of Gond is the system of four phratries or phratries, whose origin is attributed to a mythical cultural hero. Associated with these phratries are one or more totem animals which may be neither killed nor eaten by the respective phratry members. Each phratry is strictly exogamous and subdivided into a number of clans or pari. It would be difficult to determine the exact number of these clans, and no Gond is able to enumerate all the clans of his own phratry. The information about the Gond contact with other populations, breaking Gond's tradition, feudal organization are also part of works that focus on their development. God's mythology and their complex ritual, sanctioned and sustained in almost every phase of their mythical precedents, which by and large in recent days are rapidly disintegrating, are recorded broadly. The territories inhabited by the Rajgons of Hyderabad is easily defined. Its boundaries coincide with those of the Adilabad district. These regions are indeed as civilized as any other remote areas of Hyderabad, and the environment of plain Gonds has in recent generations changed so much that many of the tribes have lost their familiarity with the forest. The areas of Gonds where forest gives way to cultivated land was until few years back Gaunt country, but in the last few decades Maratha, Lambra or Lambara, Kolams, Nak or Naik Pots and other population have settled alongside of the Gonds. However, the Gonds and the Kolams still remain the predominant population. The Adilabad district comprises the tribal agriculturists, the associated communities of bards, craftsmen who economically depend on the tribes and regard agriculture as their secondary occupation, and finally the caste of Telugu and Maratha, who are the cultivators, artisans, and traders, beside the bards and craftsmen, who, though themselves not of aboriginal stock, have lived for centuries within the orbit of Gond culture. Certain communities of a very different order share today the tribal habitat in many places. These communities have few traditional associations with the Gonds. Their economy is not complementary with that of the Gonds but is highly competitive, and in many cases they have succeeded in ousting the tribes. This immigrant population may be landowners, cultivators, traders, and craftsmen. They come from varied cultural background such as Marathi and Telugu speaking caste, Banjaras, and Muslims. The contact with the outside caste in the matters of Gond economy undoubtedly had gradually led to the alienation of the Gond's ancestral land properties. Theoretical part of which the ethnography, the Rajgons of Adilabad, a peasant culture of the Deccan, myth and ritual is an example. Functional theories focus on the social or psychological functions that religion has for a group of for a group or a person. In simpler terms, the functional approach sees religion as performing certain functions for society which can be very well connected to the bond existing between the religion and the appeasement of God's lives. According to Ivan Pritchard's argument, religion cannot be understood without the social context and its social function. Myths and oracles played a great role in solving disputes and maintaining social order among the gods. In this respect, one can also agree with Durkheim, who saw religion as a reflection of the concern for society. He based his views on his research regarding totemism among the Aboriginals. With totemism, he meant that each of the many clans had a different object, plant, or animal that they had sacred and that symbolizes the clan. Durkheim saw it as the original and simplest form of religion. According to Durkheim, the analysis of this simple form of religion could provide the building blocks for more complex religions. He asserted that moralism cannot be separated from the religion. The sacred, that is religion, reinforce group interests that clashes very often with individual interest. Durkheim held the view that the function of religion is group cohesion, often performed by collectively attended rituals, and this stands as the foremost force in cementing ties in a tribal community, in this case Gonds. Geertz outlined culture as a system of inherited conception expressed in symbolic forms by means of which men communicate, perpetuate, and develop their knowledge about and attitudes towards life. 1973. He believed that the role of the anthropologist was to try to interpret the guiding symbols of each culture. Führer Hammendorf, through the recordings of myths, oracles, material and non-material aspect of the gods, had substantiated with appropriate evidences the symbolic representation of the Gond culture. Cultural ecology is the study of human adaptations to social and physical environments. Human adaptations refers to both biological and cultural processes that enable a population to survive and reproduce within a given or changing environment. The transition of Gond's livelihood pattern from shifting cultivation to settled agriculture, whereby their cultural practices too have been modified, corresponds to their adaptation to both physical and social environments. Land is an important unit for agricultural production. It has to be used sustainably to meet their demands. To meet the demands, the productivity of agriculture is closely related to the land use and cropping patterns. Therefore, the tribes practicing agriculture are strongly linked up to the lands. While tribal economy is traditionally centered on land and its resources, there are several social factors and religious rituals connected with it. These establish emotional bonds between the rituals and their land, making it more than merely a source of livelihood to the tribes. Material culture represents the things or the stuff which we create and use on a daily basis, the material products of a culture. These things could range from the clothes to the dishes in the kitchen. Some artifacts denote the class and social status, while others simply help us to accomplish a specific goal. Most importantly, material culture tells us about a place and a time, about the people who created or used the artifacts, about change over time. Just as we create material culture, so too are we shaped by the material culture that surrounds us. Description of the ethnography intellectual context. Gone society has its vertical stratification and its horizontal divisions. The latter are at least today, at least today, or more fundamental importance. The physical diversity in a tribe of homogeneous language, like the Gonds, may be considered due to the fusion of population of different racial stocks which would have occurred in the far distant past. The model on which the columns, the tribal neighbors of Gonds, shaped their new economy when the tightening of forest law forced them out of their traditional lifestyle was primarily the peasant economy of Gonds, a population of plug cultivators already familiar to them through manifold contexts of long standing. But it is not only in agricultural methods and material possessions that Gond influence is discernible. The adoption of certain customs and ceremonies seems to have long preceded economic assimilations, and in some aspects of their social life, it is difficult to discern under the veneer of Gond influence the traits peculiar to Kolam culture. The Kolams, like the Gonds, are organized in exogamous clans and have certain names identical to that of the Gonds. Marriages are regulated by the clan system modeled on the Gond lines, and the wedding ceremonial closely imitates the Gond marriage rite. However, the funeral customs of the Kolams are quite distinct from the Gond uses. The Nagpots claim to the social status higher than that of the Gonds and Kolams. It is expressed by abstention. It is expressed by abstention from both beef and pork, and the poorest Nagpots of the hills, who mainly live onto the jungle fruits and root, refuse to eat at the houses of the Gond Raja. In their social customs, the ceremonies at birth, marriage, and death, the Nagpots conform largely to the uses and ritual of the lower Hindu caste. As bards and guardians, as bards and guardians of tradition, the Pardhans play a vital role in Gond culture. Nonetheless, it was also noticed that the Pardhans discard their fiddle and abandon their ancient association with the Gonds, their own as well as their former patrons. Cultural life suffers the loss of the vital element. The development or this development, however, has yet hardly touched the central highlands with its impact or compact aboriginal population, and is confined to specific areas of the plains. This development, however, has yet hardly touched the Central Highlands with its compact aboriginal populations, and is confined to specific areas of the plains. Yet not all Gonds have Pardhans as their bards. The Khatis are the blacksmiths who enjoy a comparatively good social status, and they may enter the Gonds' houses, unlike the blacksmith as the Agaria of the central province. However, they do not take part in each other's food. The Vojaris, brass founders, are those who manufacture the sacred bells and the idols of the gods. They are regarded as wanderers, and their social status is similar to that of Khatis. An interesting point that has to be noted when the tribal and caste based societies live in contact with each other is the influence of the caste system on the tribal communities. The, the Komtis belonging to one of the highest caste of Telugu society, who have become an indispensable element in Gond economy due to their business relations with the gods, and having known the fact that gods sacrifice and consume cow, they do not treat gods in the same manner as such outcasts as Malas and Madhigas. Similarly, the Brahmins recognize the gods stand on the plane different from that of the Hindu population, and in spite of their beef eating, refrain from treating them as the so called untouchables. It seems that in this respect they adopt towards the Aboriginals the same attitude as towards the Muslims and Christians. On the other hand, no applicable impression on the Gond culture has been produced by the contact with menial caste such as the Malas and Madigas. Leather workers of the Madiga caste live in some Gond villages. They perform the function of village servants and supply the Gonds with sandals and other leather goods. In their treatment, the Gonds have followed the lead of Telugu society and consider them rather illogically as the so-called untouchables, although to Gond sentiments the Madigas' habit of beef eating and their work on cows' hide is in no way repulsive when considering the relationship between the Gonds and the neighboring Muslim populations. In the social sphere, Muslim ideas have little influence on the Aboriginal culture, the greatest contradictory being the freedom of Gond and Kolam women. Fieldwork Führer Hammendorf lived with the people he studied, engaging in their community, learning their language, eating their food, and taking part in their everyday life. Fieldwork, however, can take many different forms. Here, Führer Hammendorf also employed the visual techniques and methods of presentation in the form of photography. He has gathered enormous information by conducting surveys and analyzing records such as historical archives and government reports, several individuals and groups interviews. The oral histories also formed the major fieldwork through the Malinovuskian tradition of participant observation. Detailed, lengthy, and often complex observations of social life can be recorded by participating in the fabric of daily life as well as more formal ceremonies and rituals discussing the ideas with the willing members of the community. The field worker builds up a progressively deeper understanding of what happens in the society being studied, which may be regarded as a personal transforming experience whereby not only the culture of the people but also their needs and requirements be understood and brought into light. He undertook extensive fieldwork among the Gonds of Adilabad region. He pointed out that his work was a neutral character and that consequently there was no danger of his becoming involved in a delicate political situation. Further, he evidenced the concern felt by many anthropologists of his era that the societies under study were in danger of becoming radically changed or even disappearing in the face of modernizing world. This was indeed one of the ethical concerns that drove the work of Fourier Hammendorf. He also maintained an extensive referencing system. He also maintained an extensive cross-referencing system both within his fieldwork or field notebooks. He was committed to field documentation as an ongoing enterprise to be returned again and again in the pursuit of more and more perfect knowledge, by which he was able to come out with such classic work on the Gonds, forcing the readers and officials to ensure their good living standards. Analysis of data. The original four phratries saga of the Gonds are believed to have later split into clans Pari and then into subclans Khandan, and the Gonds explain that in the course of time each of the clans obtain a set of objects and begin to worship the Parsapan of their phratry at separate sanctuaries. Though there is significance attributed to the phratries and its deities, some gods, particularly those living far from the seat of the clan god, declare the absence of their knowledge regarding their clan deities, their names, and histories. Such an attitude may be due to the wide dispersal of families and the impact of modernization. Gonds are found to live in close contact with populations of different cultural heritage sometimes sharing one village side and sometimes inhabiting different hamlets. Nevertheless, their relationship with some of their neighbors is long standing, while with others they have only been thrown together. Yet, whatever shape his relations with the members of the other communities may have taken, nowhere is the tribal identity of the Gond impaired nor the distinction between them and other castes obscured. Context between different populations is confined to economic exchange and cultural adjustment. It has not led to any appreciable racing. It is not led to any appreciable racial blending. Neither has there been linguistic unification. The difference in physical type between the columns and gonds is not sufficiently great to exclude all the possibility of error in identification. Like the gonds, until recently, the columns subsisted on shifting cultivation, and it was due to the introduction of Forest Conservancy Act that they moved to a new mode of livelihood. The more settled mode of life, the closer contact with gonds and landowners or lowlanders, gonds and lowlanders, and in good years, the ample yield of plug land create both the wish and the possibility of supplementing the merger household goods, and one can also find columns who are dressed up like gonds. The columns are renowned for their skills in divination, and this reputation has led many Gonds communities to entrust the cult of certain local deities under the priesthood of columns, and the columns are known by the names pujaris by the Gonds. Resembling the columns in many respects are the Nayak pots, to whom the Gonds refer to as mache. They are shifting cultivators just like the columns, though they live in proximity to Gonds. There is none of the feelings of relationship or ancient association that prevails between them as well as with the columns. In the greater part of the literature on the Gonds of the central province, the Pardhans are described as the priest of gods. The denomination, however, is definitely misleading, while in places where Aboriginal culture is in decay, the position may have become obscured. The Pardhans in the Adilabad and the adjoining area of the central province cannot, by any stretch of imagination, be endowed with priestly functions. They are the hereditary bards of the gods. The songs and stories which they preserve by oral transmission are the most important depositories of the Gond tradition. Many Gond villages contain several houses of Pardhans. They stand usually a little apart from the other houses but are of the same construction, though often rather small. However, nowadays a good many Pardhans have taken up agriculture and work on the fields like many Gond. In the social observance, marriage custom and funeral rites, they follow practically on every detail the Gond pattern. They worship the same gods and as the gods. They worship the same gods as the gods and attend most of their religious ceremonies but without taking the part of the officiating priest. The Totis, considered as the subtribe of the Pardhans, are expert in tattooing. They tattoo the gods and in return are paid in cash or grain. Hence, they make regular visit to the god villages where their services are likely to be required. When the position of the Totis is considered in the social scale, they rank lower than the Pardhans. As long as no forest laws restricted the area open to cultivation, They shifted their fields every few years, cultivating the land round their villages in rotation without, however, changing their dwellings. Thus, there exist numerous village sites that have been inhabited for many generations, but individually Gonds are rather unsteady and will move to another village on slight provocation, though the horizontal divisions within the Gond society, such as the division of phratry, runs the vertical structure of an old feudal system, when in the 18th century the collapse of the Gond kingdoms deprived the tribal chieftains of the political power. This system entered upon a gradual decline, and today the former feudal lords are little more than the caste headmen. When considering the economic activities of the Gonds, there are quite a few points that should be noted as the result of development and government acts. The crops sown in September and October and grown during cool and dry seasons have attained their present day importance only with the Gond's gradual transition from shifting cultivation on the light soils to the permanent tillage of the heavy soils of the plains and valleys. All the Gonds have realized the advantages of the crop rotation, and just as in the rains they never grow wild seeds in two consecutive years on the same field, so they sow in the dry season alternative, alternatively jowar and cotton, whereas land cultivated during the rains is generally left fallow. In the subsequent cold weather, a field with black cotton soil where pulse has been sown as a rabi crop is often sown with rice in the following rains. However, only men with ample land can afford to change their crops to the best advantage. Conclusion: in the midst of the materially more advanced and economically aggressive population, Gonds form, Gonds form here and there enclaves of Aboriginal culture living in hamlets at some distance from the larger village of Hindu and Muslim folk. Despite frequent contact with the outsiders, nearly all the Rajgons of Adilabad speak Gondi among themselves. There is no one racial type to which the majority of Gonds could be said to conform, but nearly will have indefinable common element in their bearing. Despite the difference in languages and generally also in economic status, the Kolams and Gonds consider themselves related communities. Partaking of meals in each other's houses is common. However, the intermarriages between the Gonds and Kolams are rare and considered irregular by both the tribes, but the offspring of such union experience no great difficulty in being accepted into one or the other community. The Gond tradition portrays the idea that at least one particular Kolam clan owes its origin to that of Gonds. The Gond system of exogamous phratries and clan rules also Pradhan society, and each Gond has a house Pradhan of his own clan who plays at certain social functions and is entitled to traditional gifts from his patron as well as share in the movable property left by any member of the family. Though closely connected with the Gond's most sacred rights, the Pradhans are not accorded equal social status. Gonds will not partake of their food or grant them entrance into the interior of their houses. With the infiltration of Hindu ideas, this distinction tends to deepen, and the Pradhans are now in danger of being classed with the outcast of Hindu society, though the settlements of non-tribal population in and around the Gond villages had exposed them to several socio-economic changes. The acquisition of a village by the non-tribal population such as the Kometi has pushed the Gond cultivators several times into the burden of rents and also at worst resulting in the expulsion and replacement by the tenants of other caste. The contacts with the other caste groups have had influence on the cultural practice as well. Though not debarred from pig keeping by any taboo, the Gonds of today do not breed pigs. The entertainers and sadhus visiting the Gond village spread among them certain superficial knowledge of popular Hindu beliefs, and it is probably due to them that many Gonds have a vague idea of the figures in the Hindu mythology. However, the influence they exert remains on the surface, and also the cultural influence of the associated tribes and other Hindu population on the Gonds is as yet negligible. They speak their own languages and have their own set of customs which distinguishes them from each other. The myths recounting the origin of the clan deities and the deeds of divine ancestors form part of elaborate cult which is one of the most vital elements of the Gond culture. The cult of the deities and ancestors of the clan is not restricted to the great annual feast but forms an essential part of the Gond's religious life. As far as the Gond economy is concerned, they still remember the time when there were no forest laws interfering their agriculture, no excise rules depriving no excise rules depriving them of liquor and the accessibility to the forest produce. When the government restricted the utilization of what the Gonds considered their own by ancient right, there was widespread resentment due to the encroachment on the traditional tribal economy by others. In the economy of the Gonds, too, the reservation of forest wrought important changes. While the Gonds have been cultivating the flat tops of the surrounding hills on the light soil and worked in rotation with the ample period of fallow, gave excellent rain crops. The inclusion of most of these hills into forest conservation led them to rely more and more on the rich black cotton soil in the bed of the valley, changing in variety of crops cultivated. A Gond's life appears to be consistent as they do not distinguish between the natural and supernatural world. So he does not place the technical acts of plugging and sowing in the category different from that of the ritual observance which assures the sprouting of crops and protect the ripening again. How does the ethnography advance our understanding? The ethnographic study by Führer Hammendorf enables the readers to visualize the life of one of the India's largest aboriginal tribe and one of helps one to form his own opinion on the merits and demerits of the policies and which of the government of the states has adopted. The anthropological information gathered gives the account of culture contact resulting invariably in the expropriation and economic enslavement of the tribal communities. In order to study a tribal community as a whole, it should be of greater importance that we focus on the mythology and kinship structure of the particular community studied, which not only gives a profound knowledge about its history and significance but also the various intra relationships and participation of the community members in the social, ritual, and economic activities forming a web. In addition, it helps to understand the formation of the religion, the relationship of individual members of the society to their respective deities and cult centers. Another aspect to comprehend the tribe culture lies in the study of their material culture, through which one can analyze the state of the community corresponding to its history and the level of its cultural assimilation and the process of acculturation influencing them. Thank you very much.